Hello and welcome to Reddit Roasts, where Mal and I dissect profiles that have been submitted to Reddit and try and identify the strengths, the weaknesses, things they can improve, hopefully adding a little bit of value while being a little bit sarcastic along the way. Mal, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Sam.
Let's dive into the first profile, shall we?
All right. So all of our profiles today are quite interesting. There's a little something to dissect in each one. So we've
Mhm.
got for our first profile, we've got the MBA ORM final boss. This is Indian male engineer who wants to pivot careers. We see a lot of them. Our profile two is a healthcare strategist who moonlights as a social media influencer with 20,000 followers. We've got someone debating if they should do an MIF degree or an MBA. And our fourth profile is an MBB consultant who's planning ahead for the MBA, so a year or two in advance. We've also got
Good
an
stuff.
interesting bonus coming up today from someone who thinks that not having a social media presence might hurt their MBA experience. So
Super
we'll come to
topical.
yeah, we'll keep it topical. Let's move on to our profile one for today. It's a realistic shot at HSW with a GSB focus, trying to gauge my chances, especially at GSB. Undergrad T1 Indian Computer Science, 7.5 out of 10 GPA, a GRE of 334 with a perfect quant, work experience 4 years at an MBB, moved to middle management at a Series D US startup. Extracurriculars, international social impact work, and OP also has a little narrative thread in there, sustainability and green tech across each role. Uh, Demographic, peak ORM, an Indian male engineer. Good. Three questions. We'll answer those, but I want to know your take on this profile first, Sam.
Yeah, very short and sweet profile, but yeah, I love ORM final boss. That is sort of what this is a little bit. So let's go first academically. So the 7.5 out of 10 GPA is not ideal. It's not bad. I make this out to be like top 50, top 40% of the cohort. Given that it's a T1 Indian university, so we're talking like BITS Pilani, IIT, like top kind of level Indian schools, it's not a great GPA. On the flip side, that GPA is not going to get submitted to the rankings by the schools because it's not on a 4.0 scale. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off. And also from an academic perspective, the 334 GRE also goes some way to offsetting the GPA, particularly that perfect quant score. I love it.
Yeah.
Expect nothing less from a T1 computer science Indian engineer. But I mean, whatever. It's really, really good. So that's cool. So that's from an academic perspective. Now let's talk about from a professional perspective. Again, frankly, very well overrepresented, right? 4 years as an MBB. So going up against all of the other consultants. For context, for those that aren't regular watchers of Reddit Roasts, there are consistently like 30, 40, maybe more percentage of applicants are coming from management consulting, and a large chunk of them are coming from MBB. So this is, in lots of ways, one of the most difficult pools to be up against. Um, the and that's not current role either. So it doesn't look like there's any chance of an MBB sponsorship, which would be a big plus. So yeah, very, very competitive pool to be going up against. Extracurriculars, I don't, yeah, international social impact work, not much detail on that. Could be good. I'll sort of reserve judgment a little bit on that one. I'm not sure, but I don't, it's no explicit calling out like I set up my own non-profit, those kinds of really strong social ECs, but there is something there. So I imagine that's fairly neutral. Narrative thread, the sustainability thread is a good one, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I can see one of the questions is about that, so we'll talk about that. But it does sound like, from a career perspective, there is like a narrative taking shape, which is generally a really good sign. So overall, a strong profile, but really this kind of career arc is going to be the key. And yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail when when that question comes up.
Yeah, I want to bring your attention to the comments. I think OP has given a bit more details there about what goals OP is going for, and that's impact investing in that comment right there. Yeah, up
Mhm.
here, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that gives us a little bit more context. Coming back to the questions then, does the 7.5 GPA still hurt given the GRE? I know you answered that a little bit, but if you want to go into a bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's a fairly negative take. Will it hurt? I don't think it's going to be the factor that makes or breaks this application, to be honest. If you're aiming for Stanford, Stanford will look past a 7.5 CGPA if you've got something exceptional in your profile. I think that it's pretty offset by that GRE. I don't think that it's, to be honest, I don't think it's going to be the key. I don't think it's going to be what makes or breaks this, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. And then OP's second question is about, does a sustainability narrative actually move the needle at GSB or table stakes now?
Yeah. So let's talk about first about what this narrative kind of generally what it means. So what OP is basically saying here is the narrative is I was in middle management. Oh, sorry, I was at an MBB. And I think in the comments, he goes into this in a bit of detail. He says, I worked on an engagement that was sort of climate related and I liked it. And now, so I moved to a middle management role at a Series D US startup that's focused on some sort of climate technology, etc. And the narrative thread is to move to a sustainability, green tech, maybe investing role. So at a high level, that works really, really nicely. And I think OP's question is like, is it enough for GSB? Basically, it needs to stand out. It needs to pop. There's a lot of people saying that they want to work in sustainability, particularly like corporate types that want to pivot into sustainability because they're fed up with, feeling like their work isn't having that much of an impact, blah, blah, blah. And sustainability is something that they care about, so they want to pivot into that. Now, where you distinguish yourself from those people is that you've already started making this pivot, and that strengthens your credibility when it comes to this narrative. But there are a lot of other people saying it, and that is still going to be a factor. Now, before I go into what it could look like in detail, my question is the kind of key thing that's jumping to my mind is your experience in this space strong enough to compete with people who are applying to Stanford with a career narrative that is based around sustainability, right? The people who have set up climate technology companies themselves are going to be targeting Stanford, and you're going to be going up against them. The founders of your Series D US startup, if they haven't already been to Stanford, they could be applying for really strongly positioning themselves for a sustainability narrative at Stanford. Are you, as middle management at said company, going to be able to stand out against them? Honestly, that's the big question. Now, I started having a little bit of a think about what this could look like and kind of trying to get into this narrative in a bit more detail. Here's what I've got so far. Bear with me. And obviously, OP, I don't know that much detail about your background, so sort of bear with me on the details. But hopefully this example gives you a starting point as to how you can approach building your narrative. So the first thing, the most important thing, is to start with an impactful story that puts the reader in your shoes. For example, during an MBB assignment, an MBB engagement, I was in Namibia, where I met Jenny, who was an orphan who was starving because the crops in and around her town, in her region, had failed that year. Right. And maybe you want to paint the picture of like a starving child. Like it could be seriously impactful. That's a classic way to start this sort of essay. Really grab the reader's attention with something quite serious. Problem. I saw the impact of climate change on food crops. And a recent study by McKinsey says that 100,000 people are going to experience food poverty this year as a result of crop failure. So now you've taken your personal experience and you've adapted it. You've kind of put it into the context of a much wider problem. Okay, Now we're starting to get somewhere. I can see you as really kind of standing out when it comes to sustainability. Right. Let's build on this. So, having gone through this experience, I decided to pivot my career and I joined a Series D startup where I began addressing this problem by, right? It could be something like implementing a new technology or driving some sort of regulatory change or whatever it might be. So I've started my career pivot. After the MBA, I want to take that pivot a step further and pivot to climate investing. For example, a classic here is joining the YPP, the Young Professionals Program, with the IFC, which is part of the World Bank and is a big investor in climate technology, etc. So that could be a great short-term goal. And then my long-term goal is to set up my own fund that invests in technology for farmers in Africa, for example, so that orphans like Jenny can get the food they need. And you've come full circle and you're kind of referring back to the opening story again. That is a typical, what we would call career narrative. Obviously, I filled in lots of gaps here. I don't know all the details from OP's profile, but you can see how an opening story leads to a wider problem, which leads to a career and a career jump and a long-term goal, and it all sort of fits together very nicely. So, OP, hopefully that was of some use. That is how I think you need to be thinking about this career narrative and this arc. And yeah, hopefully that's sort of got you in the right direction.
Okay. And final question, OP, is admissions consultant worth it?
Is it worth it? Yeah, classic. To be honest, I think actually this is quite a textbook example of an admissions a consultant earning their salt. I think the slight nuance here is that you don't need an all-inclusive package that most admissions consultants offer. It looks like you've already got quite a good idea of your narrative. If you've been working at an MBB and you've already made a recent career move, you probably have quite a good resume already built. And if not, you can make the adaptation to an MBA resume fairly easily. I think OP's need for an admissions consultant is not an all-inclusive package. Those go for like, we're talking a $10,000 package. I don't think that's what OP needs. But I do think that OP would really benefit from help framing this narrative in a way that is impactful, because it's going to be, as I say, he's going up against all the Indian male engineers, all the MBB consultants, all the people who are looking to do sustainability work afterwards. It's a very competitive bunch that he's going up against, and he's applying to the top schools, if not the top school out there. So I do think that something like a 5-hour package is something we offer, and I won't go into details on this. You can check it out, see it all on the website. But something like a small package that really focuses on career narrative building and like essay selection and building the overall strategy, that is, I think, going to be a value add from an admissions consultant.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. I think that's all of OP's questions.
Awesome. OP, get in touch if we can help with that. But I think you're on the right path here. You've got a good shot. If GSB doesn't work out, I'm pretty confident that you could get an M7 with that profile. So good luck.
All right. Profile 2.
All right.
Worth taking a 327 GRE.
Some naughty language in this one for any children watching. Please, please switch off.
All right. So OP is planning on applying in round 1 to programs and aiming for Harvard and Stanford. GRE 327, 167 verbal, 160 quant. Writing score is not in yet. I'm going to skip the NSW. Messed up. I messed up. I took too long to write. Demographics: 26-year-old Asian American woman. Undergrad degree was done at HYPS with a 3.75 GPA. I also did my honors research there on maternal and infant health outcomes. Interesting. Work history: 1.5 years at a D2 consulting firm with 1 promotion from analyst to senior analyst. 1 year at a D2C consumer health startup as a senior associate doing FP&A and product strategy. Got laid off from that job. 1.5 years as a senior manager in product strategy at a health SaaS startup, leading a product that accounts for 1/4 of the total company revenue. C-suite member is writing a letter of recommendation. Extracurriculars, volunteer at a charity serving a big city for 4 years, have been the president of the local unit for 2 years, raised 100K. Trying to have the national board, but I think the national president has already confirmed a letter as well. I also have a pretty successful social media presence with 20K followers and brand deals. But OP is not inclined to include that in the application. Short-term goal, move to the consumer-facing tech space. Long-term goal, honestly, I don't know. Still figuring this out. OP is thinking of the entrepreneur route. Hoping for Harvard and Stanford, also applying to Wharton, Booth, Sloan, and Tuck. What do you think of this profile, Sam?
Cool, interesting one. Yeah, let's start with an upvote. I like all the detail that OP has given there. So, academically first, GPA of 3.75 is a little bit above the kind of 3.6 GPA average of the top schools from a Harvard, Yale, Princeton, blah, blah, blah school. So, very, very good undergrad for sure. 327 is not such a strong score, particularly the quant side. And as OP has already mentioned, it's because they messed up. Yeah, there's a conversation to be had about whether to take that again for sure. So that's on the academic front. Solid, not outstanding, but very solid. In terms of the professional, I think an interesting journey here. A lot of MBA buzzwords going on, right? Product strategy at a health SaaS startup. That's already like a good start for MBA, kind of a classic pre-MBA role. Senior associate doing FP&A, product strategy, again at a direct-to-consumer health tech startup. Also very typical pre-MBA work. And then 1.5 years at a T2. So that's, which T2, I think OP is probably referring to something like I guess that's Big Four, or maybe like, yeah, it's probably around Big Four kind of level that OP is referring to, with a promotion, and a promotion's always nice. So that is a very solid and quite broad work experience already. Yeah, three quite different moves, right? The product strategy, the sort of consulting work, quite a lot of different work going on there. They'll see the adcoms will see this as quite a broad and well-fulfilled professional career journey. 4 years of work experience or thereabouts is also around the sweet spot for MBA applications as well. So that's really, really nice. The layoff itself, I just want to comment on this quickly, not an issue in and of itself, but you might want to explain that in an optional essay. That might be worth mentioning. It could also be worth getting a letter of recommendation from that company, purely to say that hear it from them, to hear that from the recommender that this wasn't performance related, that this was due to a restructuring, etc. On the professional side, a couple of other points. It's interesting, there is this health focus. It comes all the way back to the honors research there on maternal and infant health outcomes. And there's this sort of healthcare, health SaaS theme going all the way through the application. So I'd be really interested to hear if there's like an origin story there that OP can use in the applications. But again, a nice professional theme taking shape. And then the social media presence is OP's sort of side hustle by the looks of it. I'm actually inclined to consider including that. I think that you can point to some quite interesting experiences and lessons learned from that, particularly if entrepreneurship does end up being your long-term goal. So I'm inclined to include that and try and connect it to the wider career journey if possible. Demographic, Asian American woman, I would say pretty neutral, maybe slightly on the URM side. Certainly qualify for a lot of scholarships that tend to target US women. So definitely not a bad profile, not a bad demographic to be part of for this at all. In terms of goals, what I like, when we don't see this often, is that this looks to me like the MBA is to move back to the consumer-facing tech space. OP's initial role, or one of the initial two roles, in fact, that OP got laid off from, were these kind of health SaaS type roles, consumer health roles. that OP wants to go back into. That's quite a compelling case to be able to say, look, I've already worked in this. I really enjoyed this and this and this. Maybe I had this as a skill gap, which I'm going to fill with the MBA. And I want to go back and I already have the network. I already know what I want to do. It's quite a compelling argument. The big question that pops up from that is, okay, so why do you need an MBA? If you're already in that industry, already had a good time, already succeeded, enjoyed it, whatever, maybe you don't need an MBA to be able to do that. So on you, OP, to really explain why you need an MBA to transition back into a role or industry that you're already in. But doable for sure. I like as well this long-term, short-term goal kind of transition. Doing a kind of a role that is at a big company as your short-term goal, and then transitioning into entrepreneurship later is a classic kind of tech industry career arc that schools will like, and I think is a useful, solid story to give to the school. So overall, a very nice profile, a nice mix of professional work. Goals are solid, extracurriculars very, very strong, academics solid as well. So yeah, a good profile overall.
Okay. And do you think it's worth, is it worth retaking the GRE to shoot for a higher quant section, given
Yeah.
that this is OP's first try at it?
Yeah, look, I think that's a no-brainer, to be honest.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like OP can quite easily get that score higher. If she messed up some specific things, she knows what she messed up, she can target those pieces with her in her revision, in her practice, particularly the quant by the sounds of it. There is quite ample upside there that doesn't require, that much more work. Mainly the test, the kind of the thing to think about is, have you scored higher than that in a practice test, like substantially higher than that in a practice test? If you have, it's generally a good sign that you can do better in the real thing. And if you don't have time, then fine, you just accept the lower score and get on with it. But OP does have time. We're end of April as we record now, and OP does have 4 months or so to go to the MBA. I would spend at least one of those months doing the GRE again. Particularly if Harvard and Stanford are the focus, which it sounds like they are. There are too many other profiles with this, with this experience for you to credibly apply with a 327, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And again, I think OP is mentioned in the comments. There's another question in response to someone else. That is, do you think another year of experience at the current job would help? I've been steadily moving up in terms of role, responsibility, and title, so hoping I can get another promotion in before applying.
Okay, so it's a question of timing. My count at the moment is 4 years of work experience, I believe OP has, right? 4 years. So in a way, you're at the 4 years of work experience sweet spot. If you look at their school, the reports that schools put out, about 4.5 years is typically the kind of average work experience on an MBA program. And OP, you're bang on that amount right now. So I would say apply now and benefit from being at that sweet spot, unless this promotion is likely to lead to a far more impressive role. If you're going to get leadership experience, for example, managing other people, that might be a reason to wait because schools will value that. Or if you're going to work on a particular project that links to your wider goals and that helps take your career in the direction that you want to go, again, there might be a reason to wait. But if neither of those are the case and you're just going to be doing kind of more or less the same thing for another year, then I wouldn't wait. I would get on with it.
Okay.
One other point actually is if it takes more than a couple of months to get the GRE higher, the GRE is probably a bigger reason to wait.
Yeah. All right. And what else do you think besides that we can do to improve her profile?
Yeah, I mean, I think these extracurriculars are definitely heading in the right way. If OP's got 4 months now before the applications, or maybe a year and 4 months potentially to play with, maybe strengthening these ECs even further could be on the cards. For example, it sounds like you're doing some pretty cool work. Can you get yourself a title? Can you get yourself a board seat? Can you get yourself formally recognized? Can you win any awards with your extracurriculars in the next few months? If you can, those can feature quite heavily in your application whether it's on your resume or in your essays. That would definitely be good. Next, there's a mention of one LOR here. I think it's the president of the extracurricular. Okay, so that's one LOR out of two,
The
typically.
other is the C-suite member in the current role at the health SaaS startup. The a senior
In previous role or current role? Because the current
in the
role,
current role in at the as the senior manager at the health SaaS startup. C-suite members right in.
okay. I might have got a bit mixed up. Oh yeah, here. It
Yeah.
might. I might be a little bit mixed up here, thinking about the order. I'm not sure if OP. I guess it's chronologically going down. So this is current role. Okay, good. So that's perfect. LORs are in a great spot. If you've got a recommender from your current role and a recommender from an impactful extracurricular you're involved in, that's a lovely split. So what can you do to improve? Like stay on top of those guys. Stay on top of them seriously. Keep that relationship warm, keep chasing them. The sooner they can do this, the better. Get it out of the way so it doesn't. So you're not kind of waiting on the recommenders later in the process. The only slight caveat here is if you do decide to push your MBA application until next year, you want to ask the LORs only when you're absolutely sure when you're doing it. Be ashamed to get a recommendation agreed from them this year, only for you to push your application and not need it. Not need it for another year. Like that would be a waste. So that's the other thing you can do. I would also say that might be worth doing a little bit more thinking about the long-term goal. Honestly, I don't know, still figuring this out. It sounds like OP's on a sort of on a path here, but doesn't quite know where that's leading. I would start narrowing down this entrepreneurial idea. There's obviously a health tech theme here. The
Yeah.
research, the work you've done, etc. I would start thinking about just high level some ideas for entrepreneurship ventures that you might get involved in, or at least the problem that you might tackle. Right, I worked with a client a few years ago who wrote about breast pumps, which is an area that is like famously underdeveloped in women who've given birth, and it's an area that one way or another she doesn't know exactly what that tech is going to look like in whatever 5 years time, but it is a problem that she wants to work on. And so you could already go as far as saying, I don't know exactly what the company is going to be, but an entrepreneurial venture focused on developing more discreet breast milk pumps could be a really good start. So start narrowing that down. That's another thing that OP can do.
All right. Okay, thank you. Shall we move on to our next profile of the day?
Yeah, one last thing actually I've just thought of. I think I'm just predicting the future here. I suspect what OP is going to end up with is a situation where she's admitted to a quite well-ranked school, could be HSW with the right strategy and approach, and an offer with a scholarship from a lower M7 T10, and is going to be in that position of choosing between a branded, like a well-recognized branded school but low scholarship money, and a lower ranked school with more scholarship money. This is a classic profile that faces that dilemma. Maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine that OP, if you come back in a year and maybe comment on this post, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the position you're in. Okay, I digress. Let's go to the next one.
All right. Next profile. MIF versus wait for the MBA versus keep applying for strategy consulting. OP feels like they're a bit in between and not sure what the best next step is. Some background, 26 years old, from Spain, a double bachelor's in business administration and international relations from a public university in Spain. 1 year at a Big Four in auditing after graduation, then completed a master in international business on a scholarship. It was marketed by an MBA, but it's a specialized master. 1 year in Milan at my country's embassy, working mainly on strategy consulting topics, market entry, market sizing, competition, etc. Currently working in Spain as a financial analyst at a semi-target institution focusing on corporate financing. Goal, break into strategy consulting, MBB or Tier 2 in Spain or Europe. Currently, current situation is OP has applied to a lot of relevant firms, hasn't received a single interview, and Yeah, he doesn't think it's like he knows that other people from his school are getting into in those firms, so it's not a school issue, um, a background issue. Hypothesis: I'm too experienced to be a typical business analyst, or I don't have enough direct consulting experience for higher roles. Also, my profile might look a bit scattered, even though there is some underlying logic. Three options. One, do an MIF at a target school. This would help with branding and would also give OP some structured recruiting pathways. I'm interested in finance anyway, could pivot to finance roles if strategy consulting does not work out. Option two, keep working, reapply later, improve the CV, positioning, prep for interviews. The risk is he keeps getting screened out. Option three, wait 2 years and do a top MBA at 28 or 29 years old. That's a standard path, but it is more expensive and it delays things. Additional context is I'm not considering an MIM, and my main concern is getting the interviews I have been denied until now. A couple of questions, but what is your overall take of
What a
this?
great question. This is what Reddit should be for. I love it. Give that a little upvote there. Um, okay. Let me let first shout out from Barcelona. Hey, as someone who's based in Spain, did an MBA, has a master's, I feel like I feel quite a bit of affinity here for this for this profile. Let me sort of overview how I see the profile to start with. We don't know grades. That's something that might potentially be a factor, but I feel like OP would have said if he thinks his undergrad grade or any grades were holding him back, I think he would have said that in the or she. I think we don't know the demographic, do we?
Hmm. Yeah, no.
They might have said that that's what's holding them back, but it could be a factor. It's certainly an unknown here for me. The school brands do seem strong, although yeah, Spanish unis aren't typically that well recognized internationally. So it's that's not outstanding anyway. But as OP says, people from her uh, uni are getting interviews, so could be a factor, but less likely. Um, you're absolutely right that from a professional perspective, your profile does look a bit scattered. Audit, international business, strategy, an embassy, potentially finance. This is spreading your experience out across lots of different industries, particularly compared to the people you're up against, who have probably forged quite a clear niche in their industry. Now, OP says that there is some underlying logic. Well, maybe that logic isn't coming through. It sounds like if OP's not getting into any interviews, then that underlying logic might be weak. It might be that there's an application issue here as well. Might not just be about the profile, it might be bad applications. So that's from a professional perspective. I don't see any mention of extracurriculars right now, and obviously this isn't a factor necessarily for jobs, but would be a factor later for MBA applications. Are there any extracurriculars in there? Europeans often aren't involved in
Mm,
extracurriculars in the same way that Americans are. There isn't the same culture, certainly at undergrad level, of driving extracurriculars as an important part. So there might be an extracurricular gap there as well. And if that's right, that could feed into the conversation later. Um, I think that, and then one other thing is I don't see a consideration at the moment for the long-term goals. I understand the
mm,
short-term goals are breaking into strategy consulting, but where does that lead later? That could play a part in applications, and I'm not seeing any indication of it at the moment. So that's sort of how I see the profile right now. Obviously,
mhm.
that's a side note because OP's got a very specific problem for right now to tackle, which I guess is the first question is what would you do in my position? Well, I have a strong answer to this, Mal. I would stick the path and apply for MBA programs in 1 or 2 years' time.
Mhm.
My count, by my count, OP has about two, two and a bit
Yeah.
years of full-time work experience. I don't think another change is going to strengthen this profile necessarily. another role change or another, doing another degree, it's already a very scattered profile. I think you need to sit down and focus on one thing for a while. I know it's frustrating, but I would stick with this role at the moment. If you're already doing financial analysis at a semi-target institution, I don't think that's your issue. I would sit that out for another year or so, and then I would apply to the top MBA programs. You and this I kind of maybe going into the second question here, but a master's in finance is not going to strengthen this profile dramatically when you already have a business master's. You
Mm-hmm.
already have financial analyst experience, which is basically what you would be doing after a typical MIF anyway. That master's in finance is not going to strengthen your profile. In fact, it might make you look even more scattered than you are. So I would honestly cross off that as an option. And I know it might open doors for recruiting in a structured way, but I don't think structured recruiting is your problem. I think your problem is your scattered profile and potentially the applications you're submitting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and you did touch on this second question a bit about the MIF in
Mm.
meaningfully improving chances for consulting recruiting in Europe, or is this a more positioning experience issue? What would you say is a good solution to that?
Yeah, it's the latter. It's a positioning issue for sure. I don't think the MIF is going to help. I think the solution is one, networking.
Mm-hmm.
In a world of AI filters and LinkedIn job applications, man, the number of people I see wasting time on LinkedIn job applications, they don't get read, and if they do get read, they get pushed aside. You end up wasting so much time and emotional energy applying to jobs via LinkedIn. I see it so often. Don't bother with that. Build connections. Go to a hackathon. Attend a hackathon, meet some people, shake some hands, look people in the eyes, build a network of people who vouch for you. That's how you're going to get these job offers. If OP and actually, I'm not necessarily. I don't know if OP is like this, but there is a tendency of that generation to think that the internet is going to do this for them. In other words, they can apply blindly to jobs, submitting the same CV and the same generic cover letter to 100 jobs and thinking they're going to get here's something back. They're not. It's an absolute waste of time. So the first thing is networking, making connections, attending things like hackathons, attending in-person events, networking with your clients as well, or the consultants that your company works with. OP, as far as I understand, is working with a semi-target institution. I wouldn't be surprised if they are hiring consultants. They probably have a relationship with a consulting firm. For you to reach out to that consulting firm and say to somebody maybe at your kind of level or a little bit above and ask for a coffee chat, there's enough of a connection there already for them to say, yeah, fine, we'll have that chat. And then build that relationship. That is a far more productive route into consulting than applying blindly. That's how I would be approaching this. I think, I think I've made my point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That's all of OP's questions. Can we move on to our profile four for today?
Let's do it.
Okay. Chances at M7, ideally HSW in Seattle, Oxbridge. Profile, short and sweet. Background, Southeast Asian, first gen, low income. Undergrad in Germany with a degree in SEM engineer-oriented exchange in the Netherlands. GPA 3.2 out of 4, GMAT focus 685, work experience 1 year as an intern, and then 7 months full-time at Michelin in SEM. 7 months at EY in finance advisory, currently 6 months at an MBA in Southeast Asia. Post MBA, OP wants to go back to consulting or move into investment banking or private equity, aiming to apply in 1 to 2 years. Should I retake the GMAT or do anything else? We'll answer that later, but what do you think just at first glance?
Okay. Let's go for academics first. 3.2 out of 4 is not ideal, right? That's straight off the bat. That is not ideal, particularly for HBS. I'm wary on that already, to be honest. GMAT Focus Edition 685 is okay, but again, that's not going to compensate for your 3.2, and it's not quite where it needs to be for HBS, even if that GPA was higher. So I would academically not off to a good start. Professional, great experience so far with the role at Michelin, obviously well-known brand, international, multinational, big company. EY Financial Advisory, a good sub kind of foundation in finance and in sort of building your consulting toolkit before 6 months at MBB, McKinsey Bain, BCG in Southeast Asia. This is a really strong career trajectory, early but strong. Demographic, definitely URM, first gen, particularly being the factor here. So goals next. You're going to have to narrow this down dramatically. This to me screams of somebody who just wants to make some money, to be honest. It's really not a good look. Oh, maybe consulting, maybe IB, maybe P. It's a very, very lightweight kind of goal. This person has not done any introspection really into their kind of post MBA career goals. Now, again, it's early, so I can kind of let them off the hook. But OP, just to be crystal clear, if you apply to business school saying consulting or IB or PE, you forget it. Overall, strong professional, not so strong outside is what I'm seeing.
Okay. And should OP retake the GMAT for HBS or HSW?
Yeah, no brainer. Absolutely. That score is, I would hazard a guess, has been about 10 or so points below the HBS average, 10, 20 points below the average. Certainly in the next couple of years when OP is applying, it will be because of great inflation. So yeah, all on its own, not high enough. I think if OP is hoping for a bit of a head start because of the kind of first gen aspect, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it here. So definitely need that score to be higher, particularly if you've got a year or two. Yeah, get on with it.
Yeah. And what else can OP do you think? And they've got 1 year, they've got 2 years. What do you think they can do besides the GMAT?
Yeah. Okay. There's a few things here. I made a list earlier, so let me run through it quickly. So one, I alluded to this before, but just to be totally clear, more career research, more career development research. This is far too broad. Have conversations with people who are in consulting, who are in IB, who are in PE, post MBA. Get a feel for which role actually works. I am inclined to say consulting is the one that makes the most sense, given that OP is at an MBB already, especially if she can secure a sponsorship offer. A sponsorship offer from an MBB would dramatically increase OP's chances and would basically kind of nail down this short-term goal as consulting. So that's the first thing. Start building out your career research. And if IB and PE is where you decide to go, that's fine too, but you're expected to have some indication of work going into that. For example, if you're consulting, one of your clients is an investment bank and you start building up networks there, relationships there, those are things you can write about in your essays, and that shows that you're serious about this transition. Ditto if it's PE, although PE frankly is my least favorite of these goals because PE is not a classic immediately post MBA goal, but for reasons we've talked about in the past. But basically, it's quite a nepotistic industry, and they don't have a pipeline directly from MBAs in the same way that IBs and consulting do. So, order of preference: consulting, IB, PE. But either way, whatever OP chooses, got to get a bit more research. So that's the first thing OP can do, besides the GMAT. Second thing, ideally line up that MBB sponsorship. If there's anything you can do over the next couple of years to increase your chances of being sponsored by your employer, which means you have a guaranteed return job offer after the MBA, and they've paid for your MBA, so the school doesn't need to give you scholarships, that will dramatically strengthen your profile. Anything you can do there in the next few months, years would be beneficial. Next, extracurriculars. As I mentioned in one of the earlier roasts, it's not such a thing for Europeans. I guess I see a Southeast Asia / Germany. I don't know exactly where OP sort of spends most of their time, but if extracurriculars are not a major part of your current life, you need to make them. make them one. Start taking up something that is community focused, that is helping out, getting out in the world, community building. That is something that MBAs really value, MBA admissions really value. And I'm not seeing that much of it right now. In fact, I'm not seeing any of it right now. That's another thing that OP can work on for the next year or so. Good examples include impact consulting. So pro bono consulting. OP is already at MBB, so it's well positioned to do impact consulting. Another would be a leadership role within your MBB, for example, being a cohort representative. A lot of our successful HBS, in fact, nearly all of our successful HBS clients from MBB have this in common, where they've had that kind of cohort leadership role. That's something OP could definitely do. And then the last thing is recommenders. Start buttering up your recommenders. I would say that for an MBB applicant, the kind of classic recommenders are one who is a career development advisor. I think at McKinsey call it a CDM, career development manager. Somebody who's had a say in sort of growing and developing your career and has seen you develop. That would be one. And two, the second recommender would be a manager on a recent engagement. Somebody who's managed you directly, worked with you in the trenches. Those are the ideal two letters of recommendation for an MBB applicant. Start buttering up those recommenders already. Start thinking about who they're going to be, build the relationship, go out of your way to help them. That's another thing you can do.
All right. Okay, thank you for that, Roast Sam. We
Cool.
are done all of our profiles for today. Shall we do our bonus question?
Our bonus question. Always love these bonus questions. What have we got today?
Is it disadvantageous to not have social media in business school? OP doesn't have Instagram or Facebook and is wondering if they might be missing out on parts of social experiences if they go into business school without them. So let's get into it. On one hand, I really value having a limited online presence for personal and privacy reasons. On the other hand, I realize a lot of social and maybe even professional life during an MBA takes place on social media. It's like clubs or companies posting about opportunities or events on Instagram that you wouldn't find out otherwise. Additionally, it seems that Instagram or Facebook makes it easier to stay visible and in touch with loose connections who you don't see in person on a regular basis, especially after you graduate. For current MBA students, do you think it's beneficial to have an active Instagram or other social media before starting school, or would it be detrimental to not have one? What do you think?
Super interesting question. As someone who's naturally quite averse to social media as well, but also was the social chair of my MBA cohort, I really feel this dilemma. Kind of four things that I thought about, four factors that I thought about that I think are very valid here and need to be and should be considered. The first one is events. OP is right that certain events are likely to get marketed on social media and will be more difficult to access without them. Now, when I say social media, those less likely to be Facebook and Instagram, more likely to be, for example, WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups. So I think OP will still hear about them, but there will be some degree of marketing on club Instagram, club Facebook pages that OP could miss out on. So I think that one is really just a bit of extra effort to stay on top of what's happening. I don't think it'll necessarily, it's not a reason to start an Instagram. The other thing is this point. I think this is probably the biggest point of them all, which is connections with people after you graduate. Everybody, when they graduate from an MBA, thinks that they're going to stay in touch with all of these people that they've had a really good time with. But I'm afraid 4, 5, 6 years after the MBA, as a point in time I am at, that group really, really narrows down the number of people that you actually stay in touch with. Facebook in particular, but also Instagram, other social media are a really good way of just loosely staying in touch with people who you have made a lot of effort and invested a lot of money into bringing into your network. Keeping them in your network with social media is a really, really important factor. I would say that if I didn't have any form of social media, I think my connections from my MBA would be dramatically lower than they are right now. So whether you could keep up certain connections by like making a phone call every Sunday evening, maybe, but frankly, it's going to be tough. So that's a really important factor. Next, you don't necessarily have to be actively giving away your own information on social media to be able to lurk and see what else is going on. I understand that like there's a nice cutoff to just not have an account at all, but equally you could just make a burner account, right? That just follows the things that you're interested in. You check it occasionally and kind of don't divulge that much on it. And you would still be able to access a lot of interesting information. I would also distinguish here between LinkedIn versus other social media. Now, this is where things get important. Recruiting is increasingly happening via LinkedIn, not by like applying to jobs directly on LinkedIn, but for things like reaching out for coffee chats, understanding the trends that people are talking about in your industry. I'm afraid, LinkedIn is a weird place, but I'm afraid it's becoming more and more important to have a pulse on your industry and to be able to set up those kinds of conversations. So, all of this to say, I definitely think going into an MBA without LinkedIn would be a mistake. I don't know if that's exactly what OP is referring to, but yeah, just to make that clear.
Yeah. And should we go through a bit through the comments to see if
Uh-oh.
you have
Let's see. What are people saying?
okay, so you
Someone's
need
talking about OnlyFans. Okay.
or MBB is not gonna give you any give you any attention.
You need an
Uh,
OnlyFans or MBB won't give you the time of day. I got into McKinsey showing them my feet covered in strawberry sauce.
seems like a major requirement. Um, but besides that, another point is echoing what you say, what you just said. It's about having a social media account and posting
Mhm.
on it. These are two different things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. This is interesting that Stern, many of the clubs have Instagram accounts. Yeah, but at Stern, once you know what the clubs are, you can stay in touch with people without Instagram. That's not a, you're interested in one or two clubs, you can find out
Yeah.
find out what's going on. This person's saying you're not at a disadvantage academically or professionally. I think you need to be careful distinguishing LinkedIn from those. Yeah. Okay. So not having Instagram, Facebook, you're not at a disadvantage. I agree with that. But if you roll LinkedIn in there, maybe I disagree.
Yeah. If only the real downside is just slightly slower social integration early on.
Earlier on, I
But
think
that
a lot
levels
of
out
what
after.
would be interesting here as well is the social integration that happens before the MBA actually starts. People making
Mhm.
connections and talking to future classmates in the months before the MBA. That's possibly more easier to do via a Facebook group, etc. I would argue that a WhatsApp group probably does what you need there. So, yeah, also an interesting factor.
All right. That's
Good
all of our
stuff.
profiles then for today, Sam. Thank you.
Good stuff. Fantastic. Well, if you enjoyed today's roast, feel free to follow, like the like the video, like the comments, like the well, whatever, like everything. Follow the channel. We post these roasts every week. We're on 50, what, 3 or something now. We're gonna be continuing this. Genuinely trying to help people early on in their MBA applications. If you'd like to have your profile roasted, send it over. You can send a DM over Reddit. It's probably the easiest way. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Sam Weeks is my name, and yeah, I'm around. So Mal, thank you very much for dredging through Reddit to find those posts. Really appreciate you taking one for the team, and I'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week.
Amazing. Take care.